Hey, my esthetician and cosmetology students, it's Dr. Kash here. I'm super excited to share with you what we did this weekend. We had a 1.5 hour long Zoom session where we went over 10 practice questions for the Esthetician Stateboard examination. We literally went over all the questions in detail and figuring out which answers were correct and or incorrect. We covered so many different topics. It was awesome. We had a great turnout and a lot of engaging students, so that made it even more fun to share what we did this weekend with my YouTube family as well. So I made a little small clip of what we did so that you can hopefully get some benefit from it as well. If you're interested in getting the whole Zoom session that we did, go ahead and click on the link below in the description and go ahead and download the whole hour-and-a-half session there. Don't forget to enroll my email list because we will be going live in the middle of December with our Esthetician Stateboard preparation course to help you pass the state board examination your first time. With my beta launch students, we will have a great discount to encourage everybody and to share the knowledge from the state board examination prep. I'm super excited about this and I hope you are too. So let's get started. So the first question that I sent you guys was, according to the NIC, the infection control and safety standards, which of the following is a standard procedure if a blood spill should occur? The way I like to answer these questions is basically not look at any of the answer choices, but to actually go through the question and answer it on my own without even, looking at the questions. For some of them, it works. For some of them, you do have to look at the answers. So for this one, it's basically asking us, what is the infection control and safety standards and what happens if there is a blood spill? All right, in order to understand this, we need to figure out what is OSHA. OSHA is basically an occupational safety and health administration. This is a governing body that is making sure that as estheticians, you are being safe and that your clients are safe. So that is a very big governing body that we should all know about. They basically set the safety and health standards. Now, if you have a blood spill, what should you do? Now, this comes down to, well, how do you really clean a blood spill, right? So we need to know what are disinfectants. Disinfectants are broken down into two categories. One of them is going to be hospital-based. The other one is going to be tuberculosis-based. But in general, these are all interconnected. Now, hospital-based is basically what you guys are going to be using a majority of the time if you're not working in a medical setting with a medical spa or something like that. Hospital disinfectants are great for non-porous places, such as your countertops, such as your implements, etc. They help to prevent diseases. That DZ is a short form for diseases. All right. Now, TB, those are going to be much more intense, disinfectants that require autoclave, things like that. And what they do, they kill bacteria that have spores. Spores are waxy coverings, wax covering on a bacteria that help it basically protect itself from its environment. So furthermore, what we want to know now is, what are these disinfectants really helping us with? They're helping us with four major things. Number one is going to be bacteria. Number two is going to be fungi. Number three, viruses. And number four, parasites. Right? Why are we cleaning? Why are we disinfecting? It's because we want to make sure that we don't get any of these in our clinic setting or our in our spa. So disinfection is going to kill these organisms. Now, what we are going to be using in our settings, in our clinic setting, is going to be chemicals such as bactericidal, virucidal, and fungicidal. How I remember this is cidal is basically just like suicide. So it's basically killing these organisms. All right. Now, what carries blood, right? Because the question is that there is a blood spill. We want to know what are blood-borne pathogens. So let's talk about those. There are major types. They include bacteria, but they also include more commonly things like HIV and hepatitis. These are the blood-borne pathogens that we want to make sure that we do not contract or do not give it to our clients. All right. So we need to make sure that our disinfectants are working against bacteria, that we're cleaning HIV and hepatitis and have an appropriate protocol in case there is a blood spill. All right, so let's go back to this question. You could see just from this question stem, we're basically going through the whole, infectious chapter, right? Like it's asking us about a blood spill, but really it's asking us, well, how do you disinfect and how do you make sure that your next client doesn't have this issue? So now let's go through the question, or let's go through the answer stem. All right. Let's cross out the ones that we are pretty sure are not the answers. So number one, or letter A, bag all blood contaminated articles. That sounds about right, right? So let's kind of keep that there. Document the incident in the blood spill log. That sounds about right. Apply a liquid styptic container to the injury. What that means is basically this word means it's like a hemostatic agent that stops bleeding. You are not a medical professional, so you cannot stop bleeding using any special liquids or hemostatic agents. You can use pressure, you can apply a Band-Aid and do common first aid things, but you cannot do anything that's going to coagulate bleeding or stop the bleeding using special instruments. Store all infected implements in a covered container. Okay. Now, once again, we're going back to the blood spill. What does the NIC infection control and safety standards say? Now, I'm pretty sure that apply a liquid one you cannot do. Store all infected implements in a covered container. That does not apply just to a blood spill. It applies to all. Now, documenting the incidents in the blood spill log, you should always have a log of any spills you have in case your client or someone gets an infection or you get an infection. There has to be a log in your practice to document what happened, okay? So that one definitely is on my high list. And then let's look at letter A, bag all blood contaminated articles. True, you are going to bag them, but is it going to be one bag, two bags, three bags, or what? The way the the NIC tells us and OSHA tells us is that it has to be, the keyword here, double bagged. Okay, you have to double bag it. You don't want to just put the infected or blood contaminated instruments or whatnot, like your sponge, your 4x4s, etc., straight up in a plastic bag. You want to put that in a plastic bag, then into a red bag, a labeled bag, and then into a appropriate container. So that one's out. Your answer is B. Move on to number 2. So number 2 is asking, which of the following do streptococci bring about? So once again, before we even read any of those answer choices, I just want to know what the question's asking me, right? It's asking me, what is streptococci? First of all, I need to know what the heck that is. So you've read it, you've been through your school, so you know that streptococci is a type of a bacteria. So let's just talk about bacteria a little bit more in detail. There are two types, major two types, categories. One is going to be pathogenic. The other one is going to be non-pathogenic. Pathogenic means that it's going to cause harm. Non-pathogenic does not cause harm. These are bacteria that live in our body that actually help us with our daily lives. And majority of our bacteria that we have live on our skin that protect us from the external world that we live in, and in our GI tract, our gastrointestinal tract, where they actually help us digest a lot of the food that we eat. Now, let's talk about different types of bacteria that we learned in school. So number one is going to be, or letter A is going to be cocci. Okay. B is going to be bacilli. C is going to be a type of a bacteria called spirilla. And in my bacteria lecture, I go into this a lot more in detail. Okay. So right now, this is just going to be, a little brief overview here. But what I would say for each one, you should know one, representative bacteria, like a bacteria that basically everybody knows for a bacilli, which would be anthrax. Okay. Everybody knows, or this is, once you start learning, you should be able to kind of let us know what type of bacteria is it, or what type of bacteria is a spirilla, and that would be syphilis. Okay. Here, we're talking about a type of a bacteria called cocci. So why don't we dive a little bit deeper into cocci, okay? Cocci, there's three types. Number one is going to be staphylococci. Number two is going to be strep. And number three is going to be diplococci. Staph are basically bacteria that are grouped together in clusters like grapes. If you looked at this under a microscope, they actually look like grapes. These can cause pus and boils. All right, streptococci, or if you looked at them under a microscope, they would look like a string of beads. And these also cause pus. They cause strep throat. And they also cause blood poisoning. Oops. Diplococci they don't really cause pus, but they do cause pneumonia. This question basically asked us, what do the following streptococci bring about? Which of the following do streptococci bring about? In your head, you've already kind of figured out, okay, bacteria, there's two types. Okay, there's streptococci. I know the three major types of streptococci, and this is my streptococci, what I need to know for the exam. So let's try and go back up here and answer the questions. So does it cause syphilis? Well, we just talked about syphilis, and syphilis is caused by spirilla. HIV is a virus, so it's not even a bacteria. Okay, blood poisoning. I can't remember that one. I'm not quite sure. Okay, let's go to D. D is comedones. So what are comedones caused by? They're blackheads essentially, and they're caused by excess oil from sebaceous glands. So it's not even a bacteria. It's not an infection. So just by the process of elimination, I can figure out that, okay, blood poisoning is the answer for this question. All right, question number 3. Blood-borne pathogens are, once again, I'm not going to read this again, okay? What I'm going to do is I want to figure out what are they asking me. They're asking me what are blood-borne pathogens. So what I know about blood-borne pathogens is that they're carried by the blood, right? So that means if I have a cut, if I went, crazy on my clients, extractions and there's blood coming out, or if my client comes in with an abrasion or a cut or something and I didn't notice it and they're bleeding, then, there's going to be blood there, right? It's going to be contaminated. So there's potential for blood-borne pathogens that can be carried from blood or from body fluids
Okay. The major types that we really worry about are mostly viruses, such as HIV that we kind of touched upon, and we worry about hepatitis, along with others, but this is just one of them that we are going to be, worried about. All right. We don't, so those are the two major types of viruses that are going to be transmitted via blood. So this is kind of what I know about bloodborne pathogens, right? This is kind of what I know. Now let's go back to the question and the answer choices. All right, bloodborne pathogens are infectious microorganisms. That sounds about right, right? Like they're infectious and they're microorganisms. They're small little, organisms that are traveling in your fluid. Okay, well, what about this diplococci? What do I know about diplococci? Well, we just learned in our other question stem, diplococci are going to be in pairs. They don't cause pus. So you're not going to see it in your patients who have, pustule acne. And they usually cause pneumonia. That means this is more of a respiratory issue. This is not a bloodborne pathogen. Okay. So let's go ahead and cross that one out. Bam. What about parasites? Well, parasites aren't usually bloodborne. Parasites, and we'll talk probably a little bit more about that, would be is parasites require a host. What is that? What I like to do is I like to think of my kids as parasites, okay? They cannot survive without my wife and I. They need somebody to basically water them. They need somebody to give them energy, like food. They need somebody to protect them, amongst so many other things, right? So parasites are going to require a host, and that is not coming through blood. That's coming through such as ticks that live on your body, right? Ticks are an example, and something else called pediculus capitis. What is that? That is head lice, right? So that those are examples of parasites. Other things such as parasites are like ringworms and things like that. Okay, let's go back up to the question here. So parasites is not one of them. That's crossed out. What about anthrax bacteria? So in our other one, we kind of, we learned one of the representative bacteria for bacilli was going to be anthrax. All right. So anthrax is a type of a bacteria, but it's mostly in powder form. Anthrax, deadly. It's a bacilli. It has spores. That's why if you've ever seen it on TV, you know that sometimes people open their mail and there's this powder and it's the anthrax powder, right? Because it's in spore form. It's not activated until it gets in your body. And it's usually through air, respiratory things like that. Okay. Sounds good. So the answer for this one, my friends, is going to be infectious microorganisms. So as you can see, simple question, bloodborne pathogens are, but the answer choices require you to know what each one of those are. So it's really important for us to really have a good handle and master all of these topics.